This is Kevin McCarthy. Kevin is the leader of the House of Representatives Republicans, and he spent the last 4 years raising money and campaigning for Republicans across the country. Thanks to his hard work, the Republicans have finally won a majority in the House. Now that he has a majority, Kevin can realize his dreams of becoming Speaker. One problem, though. Florida Representative Matt Gaetz. Matt doesn't like Kevin all that much and would prefer someone much more conservative. Matt and 20 of his other conservative friends refuse to vote for Kevin McCarthy for Speaker, meaning he can't get a majority, meaning that no one is elected Speaker. They vote for Speaker over and over and over again until Kevin agrees to make it easier to get rid of the Speaker once they're elected, among other things. Because of this, Matt and his friends sit out the vote and allow Kevin to become the new Speaker of the House of Representatives. Now, unsurprisingly, making it easier for the people that don't like you to get rid of you backfired for Kevin. After making a deal with the Democrats to prevent a government shutdown, Matt Gaetz got angry and called for a motion to vacate the Speaker. He, along with 8 Republican friends and the Democrats in the House, voted to remove Kevin McCarthy from the Speaker position. Ouch. So, now the Republican Party has to pick a new Speaker. And there are 2 obvious options. Steve Scalise, the House Majority Leader and second in command to Kevin McCarthy, and Jim Jordan, the chair of the Judiciary Committee and favorite of ultra-conservatives and Trump loyalists. So, all the Republicans hold a vote, and they chose Steve Scalise as their candidate for Speaker. But the most conservative Republicans weren't happy with this development, thinking, wait a minute, we went through all that effort to oust Kevin McCarthy just to pick his second in command? Why would we be expected to vote for him? So, Steve doesn't have the vote to become Speaker. After a few days of making calls and trying to negotiate with the resistors, he gives up and drops out of the race. Now the Republicans hold another internal vote, and this time Jim Jordan is able to win enough support to become the Republican nominee. But moderate Republicans don't want Jordan. They voted for Scalise and McCarthy, and these ultra-conservatives took away their choices, despite the fact that they had won the vote, so they sure as hell weren't going to suck it up and vote for Jordan now. So Jordan takes the Speaker election to the floor. They vote, and he doesn't have enough support. They vote again, and he lost a representative's support. They vote one more time, and now he's lost 5 more representatives, and it's becoming increasingly obvious he does not have the necessary support to win the Speaker election. So the Republicans meet again and acknowledge, we gotta pick a new guy. And pick a new guy, they would. This guy, Republican Whip Tom Emmer. He's more of a moderate Republican compared to Jordan and Scalise, but because of him voting to certify the 2020 election and voting in defense of gay marriage, the most conservative Republicans pretty much despise him. He doesn't even last 4 hours before he realizes he can't get enough support and drops out. So, Republicans have just removed their leader, and the 3 other most prominent Republicans have all tried and failed to become Speaker. So now what? Who can possibly get the 217 votes required to become Speaker of the House of Representatives? If you don't know who Mike Johnson is, no one could possibly blame you. I barely recognized the name until a few days ago. Hell, Republican Senator Susan Collins said that she didn't know him and was going to Google him. A sitting U.S. Senator didn't even know him. Mike was elected to the House of Representatives back in 2016. In his 7 years in office, he had managed to become the 7th highest ranking Republican. He's been a vocal defender of former President Trump and has criticized gay marriage, called for a national abortion ban, and advocated for large cuts to national spending. In other words, he's a dream come true for most conservative members of the House. With Emmer out of the way, conservatives managed to rally most of the party to support him as a candidate for Speaker. He managed to defeat a handful of other backbenchers for the nomination, and kept the party unified on the House floor and won the Speaker vote. Conservatives were thrilled by this development. Remember this guy, Matt Gaetz? He called Johnson's victory a massive win for the Make America Great Again movement. So, how did this backbencher that even United States senators didn't know manage to win one of the highest offices in the land and now be 3rd in line for the presidency? Well, him being a little-known backbencher is probably one of the reasons. Emmer, Scalise, McCarthy, and Jordan have all been in the House of Representatives leadership long enough to piss off at least a couple of their colleagues that could block them from becoming Speaker. Johnson's anonymity has prevented him from doing this. There's also the desperate need Republicans felt to elect a speaker. The government shuts down on November 17th, and if Republicans fail to elect a speaker, a government shutdown would be nearly certain. And Republicans knew they would rightfully get the blame for it. So a non-controversial speaker choice that would satisfy the most conservative members of the delegation sounds perfect. And it wasn't just the impending threat of a shutdown. It was embarrassing for Republicans to nominate speaker candidates just for them to nominate a new one the next day because they couldn't rally around the first candidate. And as previously mentioned, Johnson was appealing to the more conservative members of the House without carrying all the baggage that Jim Jordan had. And many moderate Republicans had already sunk Jim Jordan. They didn't want to continue the chaos. They're the ones most likely to lose their seats as they often represent the most Democratic districts. The longer the House went without a speaker, the more likely they were to lose re-election. But it begs the question. Johnson has a seemingly impossible situation ahead of him. He's been chosen to lead one of the most divided majorities the House has ever seen. People with much more experience than him have all tried and failed. And his obscureness is definitely not going to help with negotiations. In order to keep the government open, he's going to need to make a deal with the Democratic majority in the Senate, as well as with the president. He lacks the connections that Kevin McCarthy had, which will make it all the more difficult to come to a deal. And passing a budget that satisfies the ultra-conservatives in the House that could remove him at any moment, as well as the Democrats in the Senate and President Joe Biden, seems impossible. That's not even to mention the divisive issues of Ukraine and Israel funding. Moderate Republicans are going to want to continue funding for Ukraine and could pull support from Johnson if he refuses to do so. Meanwhile, on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, ultra-conservatives want to completely end funding to Ukraine. And if he doesn't, they could also pull support from him. To put it simply, Mike Johnson is faced with a seemingly impossible situation. He must balance negotiations with Joe Biden and Democrats in the Senate with ultra-conservatives in his own party that could remove him at any moment. If he's unable to do so, he will either be removed as speaker or the government will shut down, pretty much guaranteeing a House Democratic majority in 2024. Or potentially both. Either way, it's difficult to imagine that 1 year from now, we're going to be referring to Speaker Mike Johnson. But if Mike Johnson can manage to negotiate an agreement with Democrats, moderate Republicans, and ultra-conservatives, keeping the government open and preventing a shutdown, all while balancing strong opinions on Ukraine and Israel, he could go down as one of the greatest politicians and speakers of all time. Will that happen? Probably not. Near certainly no. But we can only wait